Here we go. 15 minutes past the hour, slightly late, but of course we are trying to prepare for a special, very special show, the Gnostics. The Gnostics. Okay. Well, when it comes to the Gnostics, well, I have so many things to say. So, okay, welcome everybody. Saturday, the 20th of May, or May the 20th, depending on which part of the world you are, because you like to put in America, no, May 20th. In English, 20th of May. It depends which part of the world you are.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Leo and Christy Zagami, the Leo Zagami Show. Welcome everybody.
Hi everyone, I hope you had a good week. Who's here? Who's here? Corey and Corey.
Corey and more Corys. Okay, now first of all, Christy. First of all, Christy. Well, special effects. Okay, so first of all, our sponsors. We would like to thank Bruce Codish, Pina, and then
Leosvaldo Martinez.
Leosvaldo Martinez.
Another Leo.
Another Leo. So thanks to Leosvaldo Martinez, thanks to Pina, and thanks to Bruce Codish. Because thanks to you, we are able to bring you this wonderful broadcast. And of course, I will place here on the screen one of the modalities with which you can help us out. I'm talking about, of course, GoFundMe, but we have also Cash App. No, Christy, we have a GoFundMe and Cash App. Cash App, though, is available, as we know, only in America and in Great Britain. So let me put it here on the screen before we start this very interesting show that is going to talk about 2,000 years of history. From the original Gnostics to the neo-Gnostics. The problem here is not really what the Gnostics will like to do, but unfortunately what they end up doing, and their quest for knowledge, which is part of the word Gnostic. First of all, we need to understand what the word means. Christy says she knows nothing about the Gnostics, but in reality, some of the material you studied in the past is part of Gnosticism. So, Gnosticism, gnosis, comes from the Greek word for knowledge or insight. And is the name given to a really loosely organized religious movement, philosophical also, that flourished between the first and the third century after Christ. Some say the second century, but in reality there is a lot of misconception about who the Gnostics really are, if they're good, they're bad, if they are Christian, because that's the thing, a lot of people tend to think that the Gnostics are Christian because they themselves define themselves as Christian. And there is a problem here because Gnosticism is really a collection of beliefs centered around the idea that the world is corrupt. So the material is all corrupt. And the soul is trapped in this corrupt body, in this material body. And with this special gnosis, this special knowledge, we have the key to freedom, to liberate ourselves, but they don't have the same concept of God as Christians, as Jews. Let's remember, first of all, where Gnosticism really comes from. It comes from both parts of Jewish mysticism and also parts of Christianity that were kind of maybe mingling a bit too much with the old Egyptian religion or the old pagans, and picked up certain elements, at times selling them for for Gnostic Christianity, but in reality it was their own thing, at times even putting their own words in the mouth of Jesus, you understand? To make themselves more popular, saying, oh, this is the secret teaching of Jesus. Okay, so there is a lot of misconceptions here, and there is a lot of disinfo. Plus then we have later on the Albigeans, the Cathars, the heretics in general that were, of course, punished from mainstream Christianity with these crusades that killed all of them and actually make them grow in popularity. Then we have elements of the Knights Templars, which were said to practice some form of Gnosticism. But it's in reality, in the last 3 centuries with the Freemasonry, that we have a lot of discussion about Gnosticism, though when it comes to Freemasonry, if we listen to what Tobias Cherton says in this book, and Tobias Cherton, for those who don't know, it is a contemporary author and Freemason. He was initiated in the lodge where I was, in Kirby Lodge 2818. He ended up leaving, of course, Freemasonry like me, but in reality, he also co-founded what became later on the official magazine of the United Lodge of England. Now, when it comes to the Gnosticism, there is something that he picked up here, which is worth citing. When it comes to Freemasonry, here it says that it was to an extent mistaken, for being in some way connected to the Gnostics by esoterists in the 17th century. It was then transformed into one by esoterists in the 18th and 19th century.
Esoterists?
Esoterists, yes.
Okay.
It's very, very important to understand that people like Albert Pike gave a lot of importance to the Gnostics, but also had a very confused vision of what at times the connections of this group with, for example, the Essenes. Now, the Essenes, the ones that are discussed in the Dead Sea Scrolls, are in no way the Gnostics. They don't need to be confused. There's a lot of confusion here between two things that I would like to clear up immediately to make it known, that we are doing a serious study in today's episode. I'm talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, Let me see if I can find here and then you have instead the Library of Qumran, the Library of Qumran. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gnostic material that was discovered in the so-called Library of Qumran get often confused because they were basically discovered in the same time frame, more or less, between 1945 and 1950, and mainly in the in the second half of the 1940s, there was all these discoveries, and they were very important discoveries because the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about the community of the Essenes. The community of the Essenes, which of course was a very secretive community that operated at the time of Jesus, a community which was separated from mainstream Judaism, but wasn't in any way Gnostic. That's the thing here. We have a lot of confusion, and of course that confusion at times before the discoveries of both the Dead Sea Scrolls as well as the discoveries of these Gnostic parchments that were found in these caves, the so-called, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the Qumran cave scroll. And they were discovered in, I think, between 1946 and 1956 in the Qumran caves. Then you have the Nag Hammadi Library, which basically is also known as the Gnostic Gospels, and they were discovered in in the Upper Egyptian time of Nag Hammadi in 1945. So there is always a lot of confusion. But one, the Nag Hammadi library contains actual Gnostic writings. The other one doesn't really. It concerns more with elements from the Old Testament, the rules, the rituals of these essence that broke from the worship at the Second Temple because they were a schismatic Jewish group. And apparently, they had some similarities with the therapeutics. Actually, the therapeutics are said at times, maybe erroneously, to be part of the essence. While instead, the therapists apparently were practicing Buddhism. And that's pretty unusual because the therapists were based in Alexandria, were based in ancient Greece. Having said this, there is definitely some similarities between the therapeutics and the essence. The essence, though, are very well known because they are often linked to Jesus, and they're often linked to Jesus also because Jesus never talked badly about them. Actually, the essence are never really mentioned by Jesus. Why is that? The essence, on the contrary of other groups that got on the nerves of Jesus, that were severely criticized by Jesus, like the Sadducees or others, the essence didn't, they apparently were associated or linked to John the Baptist. John the Baptist, of course, baptized in the Jordan Jesus, who was his cousin. There is an apparent link here of some kind between Jesus, John the Baptist, and the essence. Having said this, the essence represents an historical enigma with early Judaism that, I repeat, doesn't have to be in any way confused with the Gnostics. But because up until 1945, up until the discovery also later on of the scrolls, there was a lot of confusion about what the essence were. There was also,
I don't even know what they are.
Well, because they were a very secretive and very religious community, a very pious community. I wanted to...
Catholic?
No, Jewish, but
Jewish.
Schismatic. They left mainstream Judaism to retire in Quran. The interesting thing about the essence is that they were eliminated, completely destroyed by the Romans when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. And this is a little bit of a paradox because they were the ones who actually left and didn't want to have anything to do with mainstream Judaism anymore, and thought that there was no more need of worshipping at the Second Temple. And here we are, instead, the Romans destroyed them as being even, like a bunch of terrorists up in the mountains, and they had to be eliminated. So there was definitely, there's always been a little bit of confusion, almost like they wanted a lot. I think that a lot of people wanted the essence to be linked to the Gnostics. It would have been good for them to link them to the Gnostics. Instead, the essence are not linked to the Gnostic, and this it's for maybe for them something not, because even in modern, let's say this, we have neo-Gnosticism today, and this is also very confusing for a lot of people, because today we have agnostic churches all over the internet that claim themselves to be Gnostics and whatnot. Okay, now modern Gnosticism was actually born within Jesuitry and Freemasonry, and soon I will explain you how. It was born between actually, and in the French headquarters of the Theosophical Society, by sciences, conducted by a guy who used to be a Jesuit, but he masturbated too much. He was too horny, so he had to leave the seminary. and he went on getting...
real?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, for real, yes.
So that went down in history as being the reason?
That went down in history as being the reason. This is the guy, of the great masturbator, who then became the founder of the modern Gnostic Church. And why did he become the founder of the Gnostic Church? Because after he left the seminary, because, like we said, he masturbated too much, so he couldn't really take it, and the Jesuits couldn't take it too. So I don't know what kind of masturbator he was, but definitely
He couldn't take his own.
he was a serial masturbator. I don't know. The Jesuits kicked him out of the seminary. So this guy is Juliet Doniel. Now, Juliet Doniel became a librarian, but also became a Freemason. And he became a Freemason and a librarian who had access also to books that were important, books, old books, you know. But also, this was the period in which he was initiated in Freemasonry. Let me just give you the exact dates, and so you have a general idea, in which, of course, Freemasonry was still, you know, developing, and Albert Pike had just wrote his book, his big instructions, the morals and dogmas of
I saw that book in the library, and I was like, yeah.
Well,
it's
my
so
library,
big.
yeah.
In your
Well,
library,
I know.
yeah,
I need to get my mother to send it back, because actually I need that book.
That book could take up a whole box.
I know, but I need it.
More than volume 8.
I know, but that's how it is. So I need that book. Absolutely, it's important. But in any case, going back to Juliet Doniel, before he went into a trance and eventually came into contact with Jesus Christ and a couple of, I think, Albigean bishops, Cater bishops. I mean, this guy was actually communicating with the dead, and when he communicated with these old bishops, then the experts went on the books to see if they were real, because at one point the synod of bishops reunited with 40 bishops transmitting in this science to this guy, and they went and saw that each one of them was in the library and existed, and etc. So it was a bit of a particular kind of situation here. It wasn't just a mediumship. But how, of course, how can we trust mediumship? Mediumship is inherently evil. It inherently puts you in contact with beings that could actually not only not be genuine, but can be tricksters. It can be, you know. So Gnosticism, like, let's go back to the roots. Gnosticism was born just after the arrival of Jesus. It involved many different traditions. And in fact, if we had to say, is there one form of Gnosticism? No, there is many different forms of Gnosticism. The most popular forms of Gnosticism, which we can mention today, are the Basilidians, the Valentinians, and the Setians. And of course, when it comes to the Setians, we don't have to confuse ourselves with Set in ancient Egypt, but rather Set, as it's mentioned also in the Gospel, I think one of the Gospels, as being in any case an ancestor of Jesus. And of course, here we have also another very important subject to discuss today, which is, of course, also the Gnostic vision of the crucifixion, which is a completely different version, which at times seems to be very much in line with the version of the Islamic version of the crucifixion, which doesn't see Jesus on the cross, but somebody else at the last minute. So here we have, and it's very important to understand all these various group of Gnostics, Christi, because some of them actually had to do also directly with the disciples of Jesus. One in particular is known as being the most problematic one, and it's called Simon Magus. Simon Magus got into a really bad clash with Peter. Peter, of course, the founder of the church, the number one disciple of Jesus. And Simon was also known as Simon the Sorcerer, Simon the Magician, and he gave basically, he basically started what are known as the Simonians within the Gnostics. The Simonians then became the Menandries. The Menandries became later on the Basileidans. I mean, as you can see, there is always a different name depending on who was the teacher of the time. But all of them wanted somehow to still have a piece of Jesus. And I think that very important when we talk about the Gnostics, really to talk about Simon Magus, because it's from Simon Magus that we have the sin of simony. Because Simon Magus wanted to pay, he wanted to buy his position within the apostles. He started to spread his money around the apostles of Jesus after Jesus died or disappeared from the scene, depending on the points of view. And the people, of course, the disciples who carried on the work of Jesus were mainly in the Church of Jerusalem with James, but also were starting to spread with Peter and then later on with Paul around the whole Roman Empire. Well, Simon Magus got in a confrontation with Peter, which is recorded in the Gospel, in Acts of the Apostles. So this is not some kind of hypothesis. He was a magician. Apparently, at one point, he challenged Peter that he would be walking, I think, in mid-air, and that's how he died. He ended up launching himself from some high place in Rome. I don't know. Definitely, the Simon Magus, though, has still to this day followers. That's the thing. And we definitely find the accusation against him in the Act of the Apostles, and because he's such an important figure in the development of the Gnostic sects, I think that you should read this passage of Acts, dear Christy, because it's gonna make us understand. It's gonna make us understand a little bit more this figure in the eyes of traditional Christians. It's I made it bigger, so you should be able to see it.
But there was a certain man called Simon, which before time in the same city used sorcery and bewitched the people of Samaria, giving out that himself was some great one, to whom they all gave heed, from the least to the greatest, saying, "This man is the greatest power." And to him they had regard because
the power of God.
Of God. And to him they had regard because that of long time ago he had bewitched them with sorceries. But when they believed Philip preaching the things concerning the kingdom of God in the name of Jesus Christ, they were baptized, and both men and women. Then Simon himself believed also, and when he was baptized, he continued with Philip, and wondered, beholding the miracles and signs which were done. Now,
so first of all, let's put the air conditioning blasted a second, because of course we are in the middle of a heat wave already here in Palm Springs, and I always tell my wife, you need to put the air conditioning right down, otherwise we're gonna.
Thank you for telling me.
Otherwise we're gonna be melting. Now, as you can see from the Act of the Apostles, here we have a guy who really tried to associate with the apostles. He tried to get really close to the apostles. And this is how, you know, he gets to be baptized, and he gets in contact with none other than Peter. So let's carry on with this take on one of the fathers of Gnosticism, which is Simon Magus.
Now when the apostles which were at Jerusalem heard that Samaria had received the word of God.
Samaria, which is
Samaria,
this place.
had received the word of God, they sent unto them Peter and John, who, when they were come down, prayed for them, and they might receive the Holy Ghost. This English isn't that great.
No, this is the Bible. For as yet he was fallen upon none of them, only they were baptized in the name of the Lord Jesus, and laid their hands on them, and they received the Holy Ghost. And when Simon saw that through laying on the apostles' hands the Holy Ghost was given, he offered them money. So,
saying, give me also this power, that on whomever lay hands, he may receive the Holy Ghost.
So you see, he wanted to really purchase that power.
You can't do that.
I know, of course we can't. You can't do that.
People try to buy everything.
People try to buy everything, and that's really the problem.
They bought Alex Jones.
Well, they bought many people before. They bought Judas, starting from Judas, who betrayed Jesus. So let's go a little bit in these Simonians. These Simonians who had certain beliefs, because here, of course, it would be limiting to say that they were simply Christian heretics, because they were not. They were not. They had a completely different set. And actually, set. First of all, they not always believed that Jesus was a man. They believe in Docetism. Docetism, which after was considered an heresy, is basically this doctrine that the phenomenon of Jesus, his historical bodily existence, and above all the human form of Jesus, was mere resemblance without any true reality. Broadly, it is taken as they believe that Jesus only seemed to be human, but that his human form was an illusion. Now, it's interesting because Docetism, the Illuminati made, Adam Weishaupt made a degree called Docetism for the Docetists. And there is an important thing to say about the order of Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati in the history of Gnosticism. If we want to unite old Gnosticism with new Gnosticism, we can say that this Gnostic revival, even if Gnosticism never really left us, started with Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati, because the Illuminati wanted to propose Freemasonry as the depository of the teachings of real Christianity. From that moment onwards, we start hearing this. And later on, Albert Pike, in his Morals and Dogmas, confirms this, that basically Freemasonry is this this mix mash of everything, but in reality, it was hiding the true teachings of Jesus. And in fact, in Morals and Dogmas, he talks about the Essens, the Basilidians, the Valentinians, and he talks about the doctrines of Set, though he doesn't mention the Setians. He mentions basically all the Gnostics. I mean, you saw how big is that book, no? In which Albert Pike, guys, of course, there is all of this information about Albert Pike because of Leo Taxil. But we have also some truths about Albert Pike. This guy, at one point, I mean, he was a very mysterious figure. He was a lawyer, he was a soldier. He got in trouble because apparently, as a Confederate soldier, he did some war crimes against the Unionists, from the North. And so then he had to go in hiding in those mountains. How they call the weird name.
Which? Where? What country?
America, United States.
Appalachian?
No.
The United States?
Yes.
Mountains?
Yes. Just a second.
Adirondacks?
No.
Is that in the United States?
No.
Does it start with an A?
No, I might.
Everybody's probably guessing right now.
No. It's actually a place. They do that TV series with a weird name on Netflix. It was.
With the guy Justin Bateman.
Yes.
Oh, what is it?
What is it?
Can't think of it now.
let me think if I can manage to because at one point, okay, let's talk about Albert Pike, because Albert Pike can be seen really as the guy who relaunched Gnosticism before even the discovery of the library in Nagamadi in 1945, which was a big discovery.
Ozark.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay, that's it.
Well, bugging me.
Yes, he basically ended up there in the mountains over there, and he ended up for a period of time in which he started to have some occult experiences, esoteric practices led to occult experiences, and apparently there is those who accuse them of having made deals with the devil in that period. We are talking about a very controversial figure. Of course, those who are in Freemasonry know him because he participated to the reform of the Scottish Rite. He wasn't simply a Mason. He ended up living in the Washington headquarters of the Supreme Council for the last 20 years of his life. He was actually getting the money, the salary, and paid and lived there and ruled the Scottish Rite as the sovereign commander and reformed the rituals. Not only why he reformed the rituals, because he wanted to take the Christian elements away to make it universal, and he's really the guy who laid the foundations of the one world religion. Even before the arrival of Madame Blavatsky, he laid the foundation of the New Age. In fact, it's actually, I mean, let's remember, Morals and Dogmas is actually based on the morals and dogmas of magic of Eliphas Levi, who also was briefly a Freemason, but was also connected to the Theosophical Society, even if he was never part of it, because he died when they founded the Theosophical Society. He actually left a legacy that was carried on by the Theosophical Society, and specific people that were in the Theosophical Society as his foundations were connected with Eliphas Levi. Eliphas Levi, why I'm citing Eliphas Levi? Because, of course, he was enormously influential. He's the guy who let's say popularized the word occult. So, at one point in the Ozark Mountains, we have Albert Pike. Rumors emerged during that period that he was in fact conjuring the devil and engaging in sexual orgies. Of course, we can't take 100% serious everything that is said against him, because also there is some elements that seem to be picked up. But Montagu Summers in History of Witchcraft and Demonology seem to pick up what is the infamous Taxil hoax that put Albert Pike, on the top of this Palladium Rite and of the satanic thing. But there was definitely some elements there, because first of all, he never really cited properly in his book, creating a big problem here. He said because he just picked up everything from his memory. In reality, he picked up whole citations from Eliphas Levi's Dogmas and Rituals of High Magic. He picked up from many other authors without ever citing. He said that he could, you saw what kind of book is this book. Yeah. This is a massive book. But definitely he created a problem without the citation, but he didn't want to claim the authorship.
Of the book?
No, he just said, I just wrote this as a bunch of notes out of my head. Having said that, it creates a problem here, because of course it's not only the plagiarism, it's the fact that people would like to know more about what he's laying down. And the average Scottish Rite student of today is a person that doesn't really have that much time. The Scottish Rite rituals are given at times simply on stage, and they give you the degrees. They give you the degrees by doing these rituals on stage. So basically, there is an actor doing the ritual on stage for a number of degrees. You have 3,000 people sitting in a stadium, and they all become that degree.
That's smart.
I know. It's complete BS. It's complete BS. But that's how they are doing it. So what happens here? That Albert Pike definitely has a say in the in the relaunch of Gnosticism, thanks to his morals and dogmas. And then that guy which we discussed before, that French guy who used to be a Jesuit, was in the Jesuit seminary, but then left because he was a masturbator. He became an archivist and ended up being a Freemason and also having access to the archives of the Grand Orient of France. What does that mean in all this? It means that he had access to morals and dogmas, so he knew very well the Gnostics' importance given by Albert Pike. So it's also possible that Albert Pike's inspiration led him to do those sciences that he did. Here we're talking, it's very confusing, all this, guys, because it might be.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so let's make it very simple here. Let's talk, first of all, of original Gnosticism and Neo-Gnosticism, so we don't confuse them.
You always write about Neo-Gnosticism.
Okay, yeah, Neo-Gnosticism, yeah, of course, because, for example, the OTO was born out of the concept of Theodore Royce of Gnostic Neo-Templars, Neo-Gnostic Templar, New Gnostics. They were calling themselves, the Gnostic church of this masturbator ended up being given to Theodore Royce and to the OTO.
Well, imagine that.
Imagine that. Okay, so, okay. First of all, we have the first kind of Gnosticism, which is, like I said, a collection of belief centered on the fact that there is basically an evil God. His son intermedes, I mean, an evil God which controls us with the 7 guardians, the 7 planets, which are the archons. This is the concept.
Oh, I've heard that
okay.
archon thing before.
So the archons, and this is, for those who don't know, a concept which I discussed very much. Of course, you heard it before, because it's part here in this book, volume 4, at the opening of this book, is a very important concept, because the archons can also be the demonic, no, in a way. In any case.
Is this the demerge in the...
And then you have the demerge. Bravo. What do you know about that, Christy?
I don't know. I just know that word.
Okay.
It's like a group of these beings that the demerge, are they...
Okay, perfect. No, this is...
I don't know. You tell me.
No. You're saying the right thing. You're saying the right thing. Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know what else to say. So.
No, but it's important that we understand these beings. We understand the demiurge. Okay, first of all, the demiurge is for the Gnostics this an artisan-like figure responsible for crafting the physical universe for us, and he is basically, in a way, creating something evil, because if you think about the fact that the Gnostics think that everything materialistic is evil, then the material universe is evil, and then the creator of this material universe is evil too.
Why is everything evil? And then is evil good? Is that what they think?
No, absolutely no. The thing is that they think that the life in this body is it's impure. It's an experience
from
of
God. We're
I know.
children of God.
Okay, but let's not confuse, in fact, Christianity or Judaism or other forms of monotheism with the Gnostics, because the Gnostics, I think one thing about the Gnostics, that the research of knowledge didn't always draw them in the right direction. Let's think also that in the first 2 or 3 centuries, there were a bunch of Gnostic sects that became perverted, dealt with group orgies and all kinds of practices that actually led the very foundation, all that black magic practices that, followed later on in history. It was they laid the foundations there. Well, let's say that in the it was always there. Black magic was always there since the time even ancient Romans or ancient Egyptians and stuff. But in the Christian world, let's say that the Gnostic had a lot to do with the spread of black magic. So this demiurge, it's definitely the product also of a neo-Pythagorean cosmogenesis and mindset. And of course, we have to understand so that Gnosticism is a mix between the tendencies of some elements of Christianity, like I said, some elements of Christianity that at times were actually used improperly and used instrumentally. And then you had Platonic, Neo-Pythagorean, Middle Platonic schools of philosophy that kind of are part of Alexandria of Egypt, because this Gnosticism kind of like seems to flourish in Alexandria of Egypt, which became after, as you know, the birthplace for alchemy. So you have, and we have also a lot of Hermeticism, no? That then gets picked up later on in the Renaissance. So the Gnostic, guys, the Gnostics is really a big mishmash of ideas, and to say there is only one form of Gnosticism is very is erroneous. There is definitely various Gnostic systems in which the material universe is always evil, the non-material world is good, and according to some strains of Gnosticism, this demiurge is malevolent because it's linked to the material world. In others, like the Valentinians, the demiurge is simply ignorant or misguided. So, and then of course, you will ask me, how is it called? No, because sometimes it's a different names. So you have the sun, which Sabaoth, one of the sons of this god known as the demiurge, which is Yaldabaoth. So the demiurge is Yaldabaoth. The sun is Sabaoth, and Sabaoth is basically the one who dethrones his father, and because he hears the voice of reason, the voice of Sophia. No, philosophy, no, philosophy, Sophia. That's of course, then you have Theosophia, Philosophia, Sophia. Sophia is it's a major theme in Gnosticism. It's basically the bride of Christ for the Gnostics. It's that knowledge. In the Nag Hammadi text, Sophia is the lowest aeon, but is the emanation of the light of God. So Sophia is inherently not evil. She's considered to have fallen from grace, though in some way, and is doing a great help to help man in the... I would say that maybe we can associate it more with Lucifer. No, more than sin, more Lucifer, because it's a descent, it's reconciling the doctrine of the pneumatic nature of the Sophia. And then let's remember this, that the Gnostics have a very different take on two things, on the end times, on the crucifixion. And when it comes to the crucifixion, this is very important, because like I said, it brings us to talk about I think one of the fundamental moments in mankind. You know, the crucifixion of Jesus is definitely a very important moment. So what happens for the Gnostics? Now, for the regular Christians, at one point, let's call them the regular Christians. For us regular Christians, or for most of us, at one point, there is a man who arrives, he is compelled by the Romans, he's called Simon of Cyrene, and he's called by the Jesuits the last helper of Jesus, because suddenly he picks up this cross and helps him, because Jesus was taken into his towards his crucifixion, and at one point, flagellated and all the rest, is given the possibility to chill out a moment while this Simon of Cyrene picks up the cross. For the Gnostics, though, at this point, there is the moment of confusion, but because Jesus is too holy to be crucified, and this is also repeated later on by the Muslims, somebody else is set on the cross. It's a case of mistaken identity, suddenly. And while the Quran doesn't really explain who ends up on the cross, and actually some of the Setians, the book of that expires most, talks most of this, it's a Setian book, I think, the second treatise of the great Set, doesn't really tell you who dies on the cross, but it it's indicating, of course, that it's not Jesus, and that probably we find ourselves with this guy. There is Basilide, who was a great teacher, one of the great Gnostics. In fact, he gave birth to the Basilidians, who says that this guy was Simon of Cyrene. That basically, this Jesus, Simon of Cyrene is made to look as Jesus. Jesus at that point detracts from him. And there is even a moment in which he laughs about this whole situation being so paradoxical. Now, we are talking here about, of course, some very alternative accounts of the crucifixion. But let's not forget, because first of all, the so-called Gospel of Basilides, it's a text which never was really found in its entirety, and it's only reputed to be within the New Testament Apocrypha. Second of all, there is though an account by Bishop Irenaeus, who is a very important source. Bishop Irenaeus from Lyon, is considered one of the church fathers, very important guy. Now, Irenaeus quotes Basilides saying, "He appeared on earth as a man and performed miracles. Thus he himself did not suffer. Rather, a certain Simon of Cyrene was compelled to carry his cross for him. It was he who was ignorantly and erroneously crucified, being transfigured by him, so that he might be thought to be Jesus. Moreover, Jesus assumed the form of Simon and stood by, laughing at them." It's of course Irenaeus talking, Irenaeus in the famous treaty against the heresies, describing a little. But the same Irenaeus, having said that, the same Irenaeus also says another thing regarding the crucifixion and the Basilidians, the followers of Basilides, which is a little bit different, because Irenaeus says that the Basilidians, the followers of Basilides themselves, actually believed in the events of Jesus' life as described in the Gospel, and believed in the crucifixion because it was necessary, because of the destruction of Jesus' body, the world could be restored. Now, you understand there's a lot of confusion here, and it's never really clear everything, but they say that it was necessary that Jesus dies on the cross, but at the same time, they say that he was too holy. He says that because of this great archon could then illuminate part of mankind, but he says also that he was the Holy Spirit, that he was definitely, for the Gnostics, there is this taboo of saying Jesus goes on the cross, because they think Jesus is way too holy. This is constant in all the Gnostics. Okay, yeah. Jesus is too holy; he doesn't go on the cross. But we have to admit that the same kind of thing is picked up later on by the Muslims, because the Muslims say basically the same thing. They say that at the last minute Jesus was. Didn't end up on the cross. So it's interesting the fact that in some way Jesus and the crucifixion of Jesus, it's the fact that he doesn't really die. It's also then repeated by the Muslim, but it was originate a theory, an hypothesis, a story that was carried on by the Gnostics, by various group of Gnostics. And then there was the Menander Gnostics, who apparently started to practice what then became the practices later on of Cagliostro, when it comes down to immortality, certain rituals like the quarantine, the complete isolation. We talked about it now when we talk about Count Cagliostro. So the Menander Gnostics. I think that a lot of what we find in Gnosticism influenced also very much the Sabbatean Frankists. In fact, if you pick up those books for me, I have by Rabbi mounted. There is definitely that those two books, you know.
Rabbi?
Yes, those two.
First one?
No. Just a here we are. Okay, sorry, we don't have any great technological things here. One thing I want to advise you, please purchase volume 4, which is a very good book regarding everything we discussed today, and volume 5, as well as Melody's book, volume 8, which has a very interesting discussion also at the end in the last chapter about some of these influences, you know, Gnostic influence also when it comes down to, of course, the OTO. You have to understand that we have discussed the original Gnostics, but then the original Gnostics didn't really leave that many traces of themselves until these 13 parchments were found in 1945. There wasn't really many writings that survived the Inquisition and the destruction by the Inquisition of every single, but also not only the Inquisition. Before even the Inquisition was born, there was the Council of Nicaea, the Council of Constantinople. All these councils of the Catholic Church, of the future Catholic Church, was the Christian Church of the origins, really. Well, every time they made certain approvals and disapproved certain things, they destroyed all those texts. And Alexandria of Egypt was probably destroyed by the Christians to avoid having any material that, you know, we know that there is a lot of stuff in the Vatican archives.
Yeah.
You know that there's a lot of stuff that could definitely probably blow your mind and probably describe us a different version of the events also surrounding Jesus. But can we believe in a lot of the allegations, in a lot of these alleged truths that the Gnostics keep pushing, saying they have this or this other secret doctrine of Jesus? You have to be very careful here. So, first of all, when it comes to the Gnostics, their origins are still very mysterious. But if we have to summarize them, they are definitely connected to both the original Christians and also those esoteric Jews that, you know, then later on will develop further heresies until they will eventually create the Sabbatean Frankists. So when it comes to the Eliminate the Opiate, volume 1 and 2, here there is a very severe criticism of Rabbi Marvin As Anterman against the Gnostics. He's very severe with them, but that is actually the way we have to be, because sometimes, I mean, from my own personal experience within the Illuminati, all the Illuminati, Freemasons, and so on, they're all connected to these Gnostic churches. I myself was part of Stefan Heller's church in Norway. Stefan Heller is basically a Valentinian, let's say, Gnostic, but in his churches, let's say, practiced a mix of Gnosticism, also due to the discoveries made in 1945 that gave more material to this so-called wandering bishops of the Gnostic faith. But we have to understand that even Stefan Heller lineage originated from that Doniel in France. And that Doniel in France, because of the fact that he originated his whole lineage in this very weird way with the mediumship, we can't really trust. I mean, it's not like, okay, first of all, there is the Gnostic traditions that, of course, make their way within the teachings of certain rites of Freemasonry. But then also we see how Albert Pike, and then later on also John Yarker, at times tend to mix the Essenes with the Gnostics. Albert Pike very important figure in the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. John Yarker, a very important figure in the primitive Rite in the Memphis and Mizraim, who charted himself the OTO and what became after Aleister Crowley's Prey Ground. The work of this gentleman called Jules Doniel, who between 1888 and 1899 gave birth, restored the Gnostic Christian Church to the world after being kicked out of the Jesuit seminary for being masturbated. Yeah, Egol the masturbated.
You like saying that?
Yeah, I just Egol the masturbated. Okay, now it is alleged that Doniel had a miraculous vision in which he was consecrated, imagine this, by Jesus Christ and two Bogomils bishops. He had all these sciences and these things that happened to him between 1888 and 1890. And then he, at that point, went out and declared that he had basically restored the Gnostic Christian Church to the world. And he was taken seriously by a bunch of very serious esoterists in France, who then became the first bishops. Among them, it was Papus, Gerard d'Encus. Yeah. Now, Gerard d'Encus was consecrated. And then what did Jules Doniel do? You will never imagine what he did. What do you think he does? Jules Doniel, he joins Leo Taxil for a period of time to fight the Satanists in Freemasonry, thinking that everything he had done was wrong at that point. So that's pretty confusing, yeah. But so at one point though, but in 1895, after of course Taxil had communicated it was all a scam later on. Now at one point he comes out. We discussed this. For all the things, I would like the people who are following today to watch again the episode on alchemy and the episode on Leo Taxil, so they can maybe understand more. Jules Doniel became famous also with another name. He gave himself the name of a Polish Jesuit, and he wrote a text against Lucifer and against the Satanists in France. But then he went back. Papus said he wasn't sure about things, and then at one point he re-embraced, and he went back into the Gnostic Church by 1900. The Gnostic Church at that point had the Église Gnostique of Tao Valentin II, because also in one of these sciences, I think they communicated his name, Tao Valentin II, because Valentin, from the Valentinian tradition, he was communicating his name. Now, Theodore Royce, in 1908, there was a conference in Paris. There was Papus, there was Theodore Royce, there was Arno Krumheller. There wasn't Aleister Crowley, but there was all the future leadership of the OTO, and basically they were all there in 1908. And at that point, Theodore Royce had received he had been nominated bishop of this tradition. Let's not forget that all these people were a little bit. Theodore Royce was also a socialist-leaning kind of guy. He was a pedophile and all kinds of things. These people were they were pretty corrupt, let's say, to say the least. He presented to the world the Gnostic Neo-Templars, which were basically the OTO. And he made this writing in 1912, which is here, and which I will, of course, make Christy read. Right, guys. I hope that you're enjoying this episode about the Gnostics. I know it's not an easy subject.
Rambo, I hear him. He's sleeping, and he's going.
Okay.
When he's sleeping, he's like dreaming.
He's enjoying it.
Yeah.
I hope. Well, he's not having the guy that dreams that this guy has.
No.
Doniel. Okay, so these are the Gnostic Neo-Templars, the OTO presented by Theodore Royce in 1912.
Okay, the Gnostic Neo-Templars, Theodore Royce.
1912, St. Augustine writes.
Okay, can I just read? What one now calls the Christian religion existed long before Jesus Christ appeared with the ancients. The New Testament.
So, what one calls the Christian religion existed long before Jesus Christ appeared with the ancients. So, you understand here, they kind of like tend to minimize the importance of Jesus' revelation to the world. Jesus is simply bringing back what's already there. Okay?
The New Testament of the Christian Bible contains countless passages confirming the old Christos,
Apollo, Mithras, the sun god.
And which prove that the conception of the Mithras Christos cult still formed the basis of the new Jesus teaching even after the foundation of the Christian Nazarene Church. Christianity, as created by the Church Fathers, which still prevails today, is not the Christianity of the original Christians, the first Christians called primitive or also Gnostic Christians, but a pseudo-Christianity.
So you see here, they're claiming a paradox here, because, okay, first of all, the first Christians, the fathers of the church, even Irenaeus or others, Hippolytus, they were fighting the Gnostics, and they made those writings like against the heresies to expose them. Okay, and the Gnostics were eventually casted out because after the Council of Nicaea, they were, bad things were done also by the church fathers, but nothing compared to what the Gnostics were doing. So the Gnostics were casted away, and then we have the rebirth of the Gnostics through this former Jesuit student who becomes a Freemason, becomes a librarian, becomes a spiritist, because it was very popular after Allan Kardec, 1850, the birth of Spiritism. So, Spiritism had gathered momentum. And he became the medium of choice for the occultists of France who wanted to relaunch this Gnostic Christianity. However, when we see what this Gnostic Christianity became and who then picked up this legacy, we see that, you judge the fruits by the seeds by the fruits, no?
Right. Yeah.
And so the fruits, what was? Aleister Crowley? That's not a very good fruit.
That's a rotten fruit right there.
That's a rotten fruit right there. So here we have the Gnostics that are compared to Johannite Christians, because also there is this other thing, the Johannites. You see, before the relaunch of Gnosticism by, of course, let's say immediately after the relaunch of Gnosticism by, because the Illuminati were fixated with Adam Weishaupt in teaching and proposing themselves as the real Christians, which is, of course, not true. But they also wanted to trick the lower levels of the fraternity to believe that they were doing the right thing. Then, you go up and up and up the ladder of all the various degrees, and in the end, what do you become? You become your own God. You become the man God. You become a communist with no God. Now, the essence, I think, became popular is in the eyes of Adam Weishaupt and later on of all these other people, including Albert Pike, because they were also, let's not forget, an extreme form of communism, an early form of spiritual communism. Everybody was dedicated to spirituality, and at the same time, they would take on their community new people that were not part of their community rather easily, and include them even if they had very checkered past. And everybody was the same. It was like modern New Age community, all dressed in white and all the same, because that's
communism.
That's communism, and was also the birth of New Age. Even Madame Blavatsky, of course, discussed the essence in these terms, because you see, Blavatsky wanted to also criticize I mean, of course, we know that the Catholic Church is very easy to criticize because they are not really, how you say, I would say in Italian, degni rappresentanti, the good representatives of Jesus Christ on this planet. How can you say in English, please help me?
What?
That they are not good representatives.
They're not good Christ representatives on earth.
Ecco.
Okay.
Elian Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, suggested that Jesus had secretly been trained by the essence, but left the community to become a traveling healer. Then we have John Yarker soon after that says those traveling healers were the therapeutes, which was, by the way, another group, which was said also to be a Buddhist group, by the way. So all these things kind of then mix up in what became the very basis of New Age, guys. So Adam Weishaupt's fascination with early Christianity is definitely present in all the degrees of the system, and it's at the same time the essence became a staple fixture in various esoteric projects, of which was Elena Blavatsky was Isis Unveiled. But also there is another thing that is important too, that even before Joël Doniel did his sciences, you know, it was already, I mean, there was already all these occultists were using their so-called psychic insights, and they were all working through mediumship, because Blavatsky herself wrote those books with saying that she received mediumship from the secret chiefs, and she was transmitting all this. So you see, there is, and then it was Annie Besant, the second president of the Theosophical Society, claimed that Jesus was sent to be trained in an Essen community and went to an Essen monastery. But all these people didn't really ever bring any tangible evidence to the table. We have some evidence that comes to the table in 1945, finally, with the discovery of the Nag Hammadi parchment, 13 parchments and all the material within it, including the Gospel of Thomas, which is, though, at times also different from traditional Gnosticism, and some people don't even consider Gnostic. So it's very interesting to see all this, but it's also very interesting to see how the devil, no, is trying to manipulate, is trying to enter Christianity, is trying to...
Which way?
Okay, now, when we talk about what happened at the end of the 19th century in France, no, with this Gnostic revival, where was this Gnostic revival born in? It was born within the frames of the Catholic world, with many even former Catholic priests involved. There was also the Jesuits lurking around the corner all over the place, because the Jesuits had been reinstituted in the Catholic Church, had been driving the church crazy, probably by supporting secretly the Leo Taxil scam. There was a lot of things that were going on in that period. There was a war of Satanists in France. There was a real war between Satanists in France, apart from the disinformation of Leo Taxil. And in all this, you have the birth of a church which then quickly gets picked up by people like Theodore Royce, who then transmits it to Aleister Crowley, who suddenly becomes a bishop. And at that point, what he does, he picks up his telema and simply places it inside the teaching of the Ecclesia Gnostica Cattolica, the official church of the OTO, and makes it and basically says these are the official teachings of the church. This is the official, right? This is the holy book of the church, the book of the law, which he received by a demon in 1904. So these demons knew exactly what they were doing here.
Yeah, they do.
In 1888, 1889, first of all, they entered in contact with this Doniel, Jules Doniel. Then, knowing that Jules Doniel was not just simply a guy, but he was the medium of...
Did they enter through all the masturbating?
No, I don't think that.
Well, I mean, that...
No, I think that the least of his problem was I think that Jules Doniel was really a guy who was very... I mean, he was knowledgeable, because he had a lot of knowledge regarding the Caters, the Albigeans, and he had been... So when he does these sciences, are we sure he's actually transmitting something channel, or he's transmitting something that he previously had studied within his studies? Yeah. We don't really know that. So, you know, so Doniel renamed himself Tau Valentin II, consecrated several bishops from the L'Église Gnostique, and then through the Martinist Order of Papus, through all these various Illuminati groups of the time, Theodor Reuss, who had just participated to the relaunch of the Illuminati with Leopold Engel, and then with CANALE founds the OTO. I mean, definitely, this is not a coincidence. And I mean, when we have a Jules Donier, I mean, this is a guy, a very interesting figure, now to study also. I like these characters that, of course, have a very particular life, no? But then there is this constant appropriation by all these people of the essence, this Jewish religious order that had nothing to do with Christianity, nothing to do with the Gnostic. Some of them lived in a monastic community called Qumran, but they lived in Judea. There were perhaps 4,000 in total, so they didn't have that many followers. And the leaders of the essence may have thought, you know, that they had some problems with mainstream Judaism, and they didn't want to, they rejected the worship conducted in the temple as invalid and set themselves apart from it. But they had nothing to do with the Gnostics. They might have had something to do with Jesus, though. That, yes, they might have had something to do with Jesus. And Jesus never talked badly about them for that reason also. The essence, I repeat, they don't have to be included in this history, but unfortunately, I'm talking about them today because in neo-Gnosticism, there is a trend to pick up the sense and throw them in the mix with all the Gnostics because, well, you know, secretive group, they had initiations, they had all this, you know, they were talking with angels, they were very New Age in the ways and all that, and so they are naturally inclined to mix them together. This is the way, this is the thing, no? Now, when it comes to the Gnostic traditions and Freemasonry, though, even if there doesn't seem to be a direct connection, there is, though, a connection with the Setians that is remarked by Tobias Cherton, and there is a connection with the Coke manuscript, which is one of the key documents in Freemasonry. And the Setians, though, are a group that, here it says, but the Setians were not Freemasons, or were they? A passage in the first Stele of Set, which is one of the books discovered in Nag Hammadi, reminds us that Gnostic literature is not simply a vast forever letter, but also encompasses a technical vision of the world. And then, of course, it talks about the knowledge of God that inspires on many levels of being, and certain similarities with Freemasonry, because Freemasonry also cites Set and cites, of course, Noah, and we have, of course, here an understanding in the old charges that there is some elements of Hermeticism that, of course, have then become also part of Gnosticism, because we said Gnosticism included many elements also from Hermeticism, so, and from the Pythagoreans, and so eventually these elements will arrive and become part of Freemasonry. Now, the Gospel of Judas, which appeared a few years ago, it was very controversial. It was published by National Geographic. You remember this Gospel of Judas? I had a friend of my father who brought it to me. My father had the possibility to read it a few years ago. This Gospel of Judas, it is a Setian book in which the Lord, in which we have basically this total different understanding of the figure of Judas. And it is considered a part of the Setian Gnostic teachings, in which, of course, the god of this world for the Gnostics, Sarklas, is a fool, because that's what the Gnostics claim. There is, of course, a light which is from above, and there is definitely a lot of elements that Tobias Cherton in Freemasonry the Reality says put Masonry in some he describes all the similarities between the Setian practices and that of Freemasonry and the way that the Masons build their temples, the way they have so here it says also the Assyrian, Set of the Egyptians, Zeus of the Greeks, Jupiter of the Romans, also as Masonry as a comparative religion, as the first comparative form of religion, comparative religion, meaning that Freemasonry has always mixed all these elements. And if you study Albert Pike, if you study the arcane schools of the Arcane School of John Yarker, if you study many other Masonic authors, you see that the tendency is to mix, no? No religion, of course, like Bruce said, owns God, but of course here we are talking simply about what the Gnostics fought, because the Gnostics also have this problem. They are very elitarian. They thought that the truth could only be given to a few people. One of the things that I noticed in the writings of Albert Pike was the admiration that he had for the way the Gnostics initiated only a limited number of people into the high degrees, while instead they initiated most of the people in the lower degrees. I also notice how, for example, Albert Pike depicts the similarities between the 3 degrees that are present within the Basilidians, the followers of Basil, or other Gnostic traditions. The similarities also with Freemasonry, of course. But this is, like I said, today a show to make you understand how the Gnostics and the Neo-Gnostics, in the end, unfortunately, have created the basis for modern Satanism, for New Age, for everything that is going wrong in this society. Now, we don't want to condemn anybody that thinks differently from us, because everybody, you know, for me, you can believe that the pigs fly. I don't care. After the launch of the Order of the Illuminati, the Leviticon also appeared amongst the temples, and initially it was accepted like a gospel, like all the others. And the Leviticon, it's definitely it's a gospel which in the end proved to be completely fraudulent and fake, but for a period of time it became very popular and includes elements of Gnosticism, elements that definitely see Jesus as, of course, I mean, there is some elements in it that are actually quite good, even. There is not such a Gnostic take in the end. There is still a concrete, more concrete take of Jesus as a rabbi and all the rest. And but it was proven to be fake in the end. So, but for a period, a bunch of Knights Templars started to follow this text. So this demonstrates, you know, some people are very gullible. So within Freemasonry, at the moment, we have 33 degrees. We have 33 degrees that were reformed by Albert Pike. Albert Pike is called by many the great reformer. But when you go into the morals and dogmas and you start studying the morals and dogmas, you understand that it is a hymn to religious relativism. What does this mean? That in the end, he doesn't want you to believe in something, but in everything. And that is at times stretching it and making the real belief weaker in God. Now, okay, the thing is that these relativists don't believe that you have to embrace the origin of your birth. They believe that in the end, you can adopt whatever religion around the world you would like to adopt. And I already think that is not real, because you are also the fruit of your religious ancestry. And so you need to respect that, you know, if you are born within Judaism, completely Jewish, of course, you are facilitated, but you are also naturally drawn to Judaism, the same Catholicism and other forms of Christianity, or Islam, or any other religion. Now, when it comes to Freemasonry and what they have done, Freemasonry was born in 1717 in its present, you know, form, when the lodges that already existed, so Freemasonry was already there, but in this modern organization in 1717, then they gave themselves these constitutions. Of course, these constitutions were written by Reverend Anderson, who was a reverend, so was Christian, and fundamentally had a Christian base to it. It was actually recommended to be a Christian in the 18th degree of, actually was obligatory. In the 18th degree of the Scottish Rite, was obligatory to be Christian if you want to join the 18th degree in the Scottish Rite, until Albert Pike came around. This should give you an idea. Albert Pike compromised the Christian degrees of the Rite. He completely reworked them and rewrote them simply because he wanted to open to every other religious member, you know, a religious creed. Let's make the Rite the number one right by accepting everything. And this is really the basis of the religious relativism that we find, for example, in the 18th degree instruction of Albert Pike, or in the reformed versions of each degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, which is reworked to suit this idea, to make this idea that basically we have all are descending from an ancient primitive religion, and that we all come from a common denominator, and that's it. So we don't need to be Christian anymore for access to the 18th degree. This is wrong, because the 18th degree was a representation of the Last Supper of Jesus. That's what the 18th degree was claiming originally to be. It was, of course, linked also to some elements which are the elements of Rosicrucianism, which were also Christian, because they were, as, and this here, I send you back to the episode we did on the Rosicrucians.
Okay.
So you can rewatch the episode. And so this, we can say that the birth of the one world religion and the future of New Age was laid down in Albert Pike in the Morals and Dogmas of Freemasonry, and in his reform of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite degrees. And it's not positive. It's not positive. Unfortunately, the results were not positive. All these crosses that they were in the degrees, the high degrees of the Scottish Rite, became basically symbolic. Then everybody from each religion could join in their own terms, in their own interpretation. Albert Pike says basically interpret everything by your own creed, by your own vision of it. That's it. It's very, understand? So Gnosticism was born 2,000 years ago with all these teachers that came after Jesus and that claimed they had his original teachings. Now, we don't really think that is the entire truth. We think that in many cases, a lot of those teachings were manipulated to suit their own mystery school, to promote their own vision. Maybe some of the secret teachings of Jesus were transmitted and were preserved, but definitely they were not preserved in their entirety in the purest form in Freemasonry as they claim. This is a complete erroneous and spurious claim, which wasn't even made by Albert Pike first. Albert Pike wasn't the first to make this assertion. It was just 70, 80 years before him, actually 80 years before him. It was another guy, and it was Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Illuminati. Guys, this is, you know, they suddenly reworked everything. Even the figure of Hiram Abiff was transformed in the figure of Jesus. So Hiram Abiff dies and is reborn. Jesus dies and is reborn. And then they say, you see, that is the proof, the evidence that we are the real Christians, that our teachings have been persecuted for hundreds of years. We had to hide them in these mystery schools, and ultimately they ended up in Freemasonry. Now, this is basically what happens. So even if in reality, like Tobias Cherton also says in his book, by citing also both this Roger Dash's Dictionary of Gnosis of Western Esotericism that came out in 2005, which says that basically that wasn't the case. And it says here, while anyone who studies Freemasonry is aware that at least in the 18th century, Freemasonry on the continent became attracted to movements of Gnosticism, spiritual, magical, alchemical movements, it is generally heard that these interests were entirely imported from the outside. French Masonic scholar Roger Daché, for example, believes that Freemasonry was not a Gnostic tradition. According to Daché analysis, Dictionary of Gnosis and Western Esotericism, Freemasonry was not, to an extent, mistaken for one by esoterists in the 17th century, the Mason word. So the lost word comes from there, basically. It was, when transformed into one by esoterists in the 18th and 19th, at least within the spheres of so-called fringe Masonry. But it's not only fringe Masonry here. It's also the ancient ascetic Scottish. It's not fringe Masonry. It's actually, they accepted the most powerful and influential rite in mainstream Freemasonry in America. A concomitant with the conclusion is that there was nothing esoteric about Freemasonry in the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, the understanding of the word esoteric is linked to the notion of secrets, or even the great secret, the Grail, holy gnosis, and so on. But the Middle Ages were rich in powerful spiritual symbolism. It would be remarkable if Mason had not seen touched by such symbolism. Of course, because we saw that Gnosticism took also that Hermeticism, all that part, all that Hermeticism, Neoplatonism that became so popular in the Renaissance, and later on inspired the Rosicrucians, that inspired then the Freemasons in turn. So there was some kind of inspiration, but definitely wasn't like a original Gnostic school that survived and was transmitted into Freemasonry. That is a claim that doesn't really stand the test of time, and in fact they all now claim to be the sons of Julio Doiniel and his Gnostic sciences, in which he communicated with I don't know what, and he suddenly was elevated to this new patriarch of modern Gnosticism, or the modern Gnostic movement. You have, of course, within the modern Gnostic movement also many different, they pick up what they want, they leave out what they don't. This is my own experience. Aleister Crowley, of course, then made Telema part of this new Gnostic movement. Of course, and this I have to admit, traditional, between brackets, Gnostics that come from the Église Gnostique that was received mediumistically by Jules Doiniel, not always accept Crowleyanity or his own form of Gnosticism. There's very few that do. They say, oh no, but that stuff is too much, that stuff is not really our kind of thing. So the Gnostic revival, though, like we discussed today, that happened in France, that happened in Paris, which, like I explained in volume 6.66, where is it? What is Paris in this book, Christy?
What?
It's the place where they did the first satanic mass in history. It's a place where we have all the Satanists. So no coincidence that Satan decided to have Doiniel consecrated through a spurious spiritual experience and not a line of apostolic, a genuine line of apostolic succession. It's also important to understand that this Doiniel guy was definitely also the typical product of his time. he did these sciences in what was the freshly opened headquarters of the Theosophical Society in France. So the Theosophical Society is, like I explain in my books, even in my latest book, Volume 8, I explain how, but in all my recent books, I have explained this concept that without theosophy, there will not be modern Satanism. Modern Satanism is basically born out of theosophy. So all this is, I mean, my own personal experience within the modern Gnostic churches was really incredible, guys. I remember one day, because I was, when I was in the Illuminati, I was very active in all these things, I even celebrated a Gnostic Mass myself at one point.
Was there any naked people?
No, but once I had this guy, this 11th degree, this Coronzo guy, this guy who was a bishop. He was actually Runa, I think. He's actually, Koenig talks about him in the OTO Phenomenon. And he was a friend of Michael Aquino. He celebrated this Mass, invited me. I went there because it was holding the headquarters of the Gnostic Church in Oslo, which was used by, at one point was used by different branches of Gnosticism. So I went to see this Gnostic Mass, and the guy showed up with his parchments on a naked body.
Ew.
The parchments of a priest, so you couldn't really see much because they cover most of the body. But
he was naked?
When you see on the side, you could see he was naked. It was like, I thought that was really hilarious.
I bet you were laughing.
I was totally laughing. I had even a Gnostic Mass celebrated for my birthday in that church. I mean, it was definitely.
Did you join like everything?
No, but.
Were you ever Buddhist?
No, I didn't join. I was part of the Illuminati. Have this very close link with the Gnostic churches, and they are fixated with all the various Gnostic lineages and stuff. Even if they're all spurious, even if they all come from this Doniel and they're all BS, but they all wanted to have the various lineage. No, I have this lineage, I have this other lineage. I collect. They were wandering. It was known as the phenomenon of the wandering bishops. But there was also a very nice person that I met who is now deceased, the late Ian Sutter. Ian Sutter wasn't in the OTO, was actually nominated the priest by Bishop Stephen Heller, who has his church here in LA. And he was a very nice guy who studied very seriously Gnosticism, who had a very serious library in his headquarters there in Oslo, so I could accede his headquarters, study in his library. I went to his masses. They were very respectful, but done very properly. They were done behind the veil, I remember always. He had always this tradition of covering with a veil when he was celebrating Mass. The Mass was celebrating like the Orthodox or the traditional Tridentine Mass with facing, not, the priest facing this way, but the other way. And Stephen Heller instead gave me the creeps when I met him and came to Oslo. Yeah, he's some Austro-Hungarian guy, I think, but he talks like a Nazi, basically. And I talk about in volume 3 of my Confessions. I show actually a picture of his church that at one point went on fire here in LA. In any case, these people within this Gnostic world were really weird because they could be proposing themselves dressed up like a Catholic priest, and they were actually hanging out at times with Catholic priests. And then you will find them involved with occult rituals, Satanism, voodoo, all kinds of things. I mean, look, Nikolai Frisford, he was a bishop.
What?
Of various Gnostic traditions. He had a whole thing. Then you have Michael Berthiaud, the bishop of the Goronzon Club in Chicago.
It's just so evil.
I know, it's some far out.
I'm sick of it now.
Let's say this, that the Jesuits then, of course, intervened and took control of all the Gnostic lineages after Julius Doniel did that. Every single lineage was infiltrated. In the early 2000s, I think, they broke into the headquarters of the Église Gnostique in France because they were trying to get, imagine, documents. They were so obsessed. I mean, obsessed with what? It was created by a guy who claimed he had some sciences and with Jesus and a couple of bishops. I guess that what really made a credible guy out of the patriarch Tau Valentinus II was when he, in this science, he communicated with 40 different bishops and he gave the names. But everybody who has a good memory, who studies from the books, who is a librarian, who can have access to all the books and can study all those names, no, he has a good memory, he studies all those names. I mean, we have to also be very careful because the sciences always have their problems. In any case, Albert Pike was also very much inspirational for modern, for neo-Gnosticism, for the modern Gnostic movements. Albert Pike, I think, was the guy who really gave the kickstart. Without him, probably there would not have been all that.
Yeah.
And would have been probably a fortune, because we will also have avoided an heresy like Aleister Crowley, bishop, who even communicated this 12th degree in which he communicated only to one person, Crow, I think it was called William Crow, from his own church and all these things. They're all a bunch of Satanists, whatever. In any case, one thing is for sure. I remember in the 90s, in the early 2000s, I met online this, I was one of these member of these Yahoo groups, Gnostic groups. We had groups and people could, it was different. You didn't have forums online, you had emails. People were part of this chain of emails, no? Mm-hmm. And I was part of this Gnostic group, I remember. And the guy, the head, was a communist from the Italian Communist Party, Massimo Coriandro. And it was like, Gnosticism is basically communism. And also Gnosticism is at the basis of the New Age movement, because you remember when we discussed the origins of the New Age movement in Switzerland, Ascona, the Mount Veritas, Franz Hartmann, Theodor Reuss, they were all claiming to be Gnostics, and they were all there dancing naked around with women naked, everybody, and it was all Gnostic. Because unfortunately, even in the original Gnostics, there was this liberty Gnostics.
I noticed that in the transgender, there's a lot of Gnostic stuff with that. Like, I don't know, like I've seen that, like possibly. In the transgender, like you see a lot of Gnostic things, like bishop. I don't know why I'm saying that. I must have seen something.
You must have seen, but listen, I saw because then, Crowley launches Coronation Club, and then all these lineages of homosexual wandering Gnostic bishops sprang out of Crowley's practices. I know, it's just so far out. I think that today
I was when I was doing all my studying and stuff, it was really a lot of studying of different stuff, because I read like a lot of different books on occultism, as well as studying Buddhism as well, and just all this mishmash really of different things. And finally, at the end of it, I was just so sick. I didn't know. I mean, I was confused. I was sick of it all, and I just decided that I was just going to trust what I always did, and that's just God. It's the God of my heart, and it's the God that I know. It's the God from when I was a kid.
Can I say something?
And I don't need to know anything. I already know what God is. I don't need anybody to tell me anything. And all this stuff is just, I don't know what. Aside from the Bible.
Now, last week, as you know, we did a whole episode on the elixir vitae, elixir of life. And it seems to me that we are at the same point here. Because that's why a lot of these Gnostics, the neo-Gnostics, not the original Gnostics, because the original Gnostics didn't have this Graal fantasy, but the neo-Gnostics have this Graal fantasy. Absolutely. So it seems to me that in the end, it's just like people trying to have a very twisted interpretation of reality to suit their own needs. But in the end, God is one. God is the fountain of life. God is the fountain of eternal life, if you believe in him. And I think that the problem here of this interpretation of everything material as erroneous and evil, and the fact that at the same time we have different forms of Gnosticism that say different things, at times even opposite things. It's very confusing. But I think that for a reality check at the end of this show, we can say that yes, maybe some Gnostics were genuine in their search of knowledge. But the problem is they didn't search in the right places, and they eventually arrived to conclusions that made their life not a very happy life. Now, let me tell you, now I don't want to, I mean, Jan Sater was a brilliant painter and stuff. He died very young. When I heard of his death, I was quite shocked. But to me, it seems that also this modern Gnosticism is very much connected to the whole New Age movement. Because when I asked him, how did you come in contact with Gnosticism? He described me, he was an older guy, no? Mm-hmm. And he was just a hippie from the, one of those hippies here in the late 60s, all into spiritual stuff, Buddhism and whatnot, and the gurus that came here for the first time in the West teaching us yoga and all that thing. And then suddenly he had this encounter with Stefan Heller. He had this encounter, I remember, with Gnosticism, and he was struck by this by Gnosticism. But it seemed that he came from that kind of ambiance. He came from that kind of. He was in search of something that he found in these teachings, but I don't really know if these teachings are the answer, because it seems to me that we have to at least have some evidence in our hands. And yes, of course, if the evidence is the Nag Hammadi parchments, there is a lot of material to study, to evaluate, and all the rest. But at the same time, we need to be a lot more realistic, and we need to leave all those psychic insights or now maybe we have signal. Let me see. Okay, guys, sorry for that technical problem. Unfortunately, these computers have been on all day long because I've been broadcasting first for my Italian audience, now for you. And we are almost 1 hour and 45 minutes into this show. So we want to thank, of course, everybody. But before that, Christy, you were saying something.
I totally forgot what I was saying.
No, you were talking about mediumship as an evil. We can't trust the product of mediumship.
Because, okay, I watch all these shows And they're about like all these people that claim to be messiahs. Like I saw one yesterday, and it was called the family.
Yeah, the famous family in Australia, which, by the way, Julian Assange had some connection to that group, which was giving LSD to the children. I mean, it's crazy.
It's just that it's from this mediumship that they get all these ideas. And of course the devil is going to say he's God, and of course he's going to tell you you're God, and of course all these things.
Like for example, some of these Gnostic groups just came around saying, I'm going to exorcise all the archons, and then suddenly they formed a new group, or I will interpret this in a certain way because this will free us from all evil. But we are all inherently evil because until we live in this material world, or all the kind of things that, let's remember one thing, the original sin. If we need, if we call ourselves Christians, we believe that the baptism clears that original sin. Now, the Gnostics are not really clear on that point. They've never been clear on that point. And their involvement also of the essence, John the Baptist, the Johannites, and everything into their mishmash thing is just what has unfortunately carried till today in the New Age tradition, which is actually, if we have to be honest, the New Age tradition is really inherits that tradition. It's not a great tradition. It's a very demonic tradition that creates confusion and mixes everything. No?
Yeah.
So mediumship. So the fact that originally there might have been some people in contact with the apostles, in contact with Jesus, who maybe had some kind of teachings that the fathers of the church were scared about, is possible, including reincarnation, because I think that is a topic that definitely we have evidence the church tried to bury, and they eventually managed with the Council of Constantinople. But apart from that, and the fact is definitely there is some hidden knowledge about Jesus and who he was and not was, that's probably hidden in the archives of the Vatican.
Yeah.
But the Gnostics and everything that is ascribed to this Gnostic belief, well, that is a different thing. And it doesn't always lead to the positive outcome that, this communication, also this encouraging communications with, for example, with the angels in the New Age tradition is typical of all this. And also we see that Freemasonry.
He's awake.
Okay, pick up a Rambo, because we are definitely closing with our sound and with.
I think he's ending the show now. So.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Remember, the real knowledge.
Look who it is.
Here is Rambo. For me, I'm in peace when I'm with God, and God gives me all the knowledge that I want, and I'm really happy with that. I also think that the elitarian view the Gnostics have, which is always, like we know it all and we are the ones in charge of these secrets, well, it doesn't stand what the gospel says. Know the truth, and the truth should set you free. The truth should be for everybody now.
And the meek will inherit the earth.
Absolutely. So take care, guys. I hope the show was appreciated. You can help us with GoFundMe. You can help us with Cash App. We will be back next Saturday with more in the Exploring the Illuminati Occult series. This was part 20, the Gnostics.
Bye, everyone. He's escaping.
Purchase the books, Christie's books. Here they are. My books. Here they are.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks to Pina, thanks to Bruce, thanks
and Leah,
to
Osvaldo Martinez.
Thank you, sponsors.
Gracias.
Grazie. Should we actually play the applause for our sponsors, as they have been so kind to us?
If you insist.
Yeah, we could, but I don't find it. I don't have it here.
Get with the program.
I had it in the
Get with the program.
I had it in the other computer. So
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend. I make the applause with my hands. Bravi! That's all, and a little bit more.